Hi, and welcome everybody. I'm excited to welcome Alison McDowell back to Real Talk with ZSJ. And this is sort of a impromptu live that she and I cooked up, but she is very popular on this channel. So she's definitely back by popular demand. So that's why the video was set up that way. If you look back at our episodes 5, 7, and 10, I think, you'll see that there's a lot of information that we want to make sure that the community is continuing to get out and share. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. That's the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people, is that they've had to watch our videos like more than one time. So make sure you like this video right now, and also make sure you're sharing it with your friends and loved ones. It's a Sunday afternoon, so people are probably relaxing, and I think you'll see that this will be a good time, well spent with each other. So Alison, welcome back. Take us a few minutes to introduce yourself. We may have new people here. Just introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, I'm very grateful. We always have a good conversation, Zakia, and it's kind of nice this time, because since I don't feel pressed to deliver a certain set of information, I think we can just have a little bit more back and forth, which will be really productive, because I love talking with you, and I think these kinds of conversations are really important. So I'm based in Philadelphia. My standard line is I'm a mom and an independent researcher in Philadelphia, and I have a blog. My blog is called Wrench in the Gears, wrench like the tool, in the gears.com. And I have a YouTube channel. There's a lot of material there. And I agree, I'm working on trying to figure out how to frame it better. And I have some people who are giving me some guidance on structuring my website and other things, but it's almost like an immersion course in a new language. And I think, and I'm hesitant on that. I did study abroad, but I did it where I lived with all other college students that spoke English. So I wasn't even that motivated to just be dropped into another culture. But I think that is probably the equivalent of getting exposed to some of these things and feeling like, what universe did I just wake up in? This is totally not, where are my bearings? And then if you find the information compelling enough and you stick with us, after a while, you start to get your sea legs under you, and then you can start using the tools, the ways of seeing. And then once you see it, you've said it yourself, once you start, it starts to get in focus. You almost can't not see it. It's everywhere. And so I do a lot of research. I started out with, like yourself, we were moms, stuff was not right in the public school systems. We were trying to take stands and make entities accountable. And then I started following money. And then once you start following money, you realize pretty quickly that a lot of it is about power and influence. And, from what I've found, subverting the public will to benefit institutional power and corporate power, and sort of even now at the global level. So I just kept ramping it up. It was like schools, it was poverty, it was substance use issues, it was health, and then the pandemic, it's just gone global. So a lot of what I do is around looking at finance and looking at the ways in which the finance meshes with technology in ways that are being framed as liberatory, but given the power imbalance and the history of structural racism, it's hard to, I think that people need to interrogate these systems more, instead of just presuming that the people who are wielding the tools have everybody's best interests at heart, especially communities that have been targeted for a long time.
I'm shocked sometimes by Black academics and Black liberals who are feigning all this trust for the system and the government, and it's mind-boggling to me. I don't identify, certainly not as a liberal. I identify more as a, just a Pan-Africanist, and I question everything. I've been like that for a very long time, and I think I shared with you that I felt like the universe connected us, because I, for the entire year, have not had the language to share what I was feeling. It's like an intuition, something's not right about a lot of things that's happening, but I certainly didn't have the level of research that you have been doing independently to kind of connect it. And it's so cliche that people say, follow the money, but that's literally what you're doing. And I can remember on our very first time together, which I believe was episode 5 here on this channel, which is still the most watched thing that I've ever done. I just started this channel like in November, December of last year, late November, early December. I can't remember. So it's very new. And I remember it was Christmas Eve and how many people we had with us on Christmas Eve, like watching live.
Yeah, right.
It was wonderful. And people were like really engaged, like in the comments and everything. And so I was like, I'm on to something, you know? And I remember our first conversation, I think was like an hour or more long, like even when we talked on the phone, and I was like, this is making more sense now. And now even more since I've been following you, like I see the things that you talk about like every single day. And like you said earlier, like sometimes I text you out of the blue and I'm like, I'm hearing your language now that people, and this just happened Friday, right? So I was invited by a friend on my LinkedIn page who is in like the nonprofit world, and he runs a big nonprofit in California. And he invited me to this event. Let me just tell you exactly what it is. But I sent it to you, and it literally said social impact investing. And I was like, oh, this can't be good, because I've talked to Alison about this. She's talked about this. She's always talking about this. And I'm just going to go back and see if I can just find, you know, some of the language that they were using. But I remember I was just shocked, and I joined it. I said, oh, well, since I've been invited, I'm going to listen. And I want to listen to exactly, you know, what they're saying. What are they talking about, right? And I started asking questions in the comments, and I could tell like it was making people uncomfortable, because they're like, well, who is this person? I'm sure they went back to my LinkedIn. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure they went back. But it was like, okay, here's the name of the event. It was called the New York State CDFI. I've not heard of CDFIs before, but when I was on the webinar live, they were basically talking about like they are financial community-based financial institutions that serve primarily marginalized communities. I said, no wonder why I haven't heard of them. This shit is probably predatory. And I remember I was texting you on Friday. I sent you screenshots and stuff like that.
I'm trying to remember, is our CDFI, is that where banking institutions are supposed to set aside a certain amount of their assets into their local community? I think I believe
it was based off a racial.
Yeah,
it was based off like some kind of lawsuit that had been filed, and the government, of course, passed a bill about, because of the years of redlining, where these banks were found to be guilty of like redlining and not lending to Black folks and other poor folks and things like that. So I believe you're right. Now they're going to fix it. And the response that I said to them, because they had somebody from Habitat for Humanity just lauding themselves about like, how wonderful, all the wonderful work, because they get money. They get money in New York from this group. And I said, are y'all serious? I said, every time I come to New York City, there are homeless Black men who are in need of medical attention that people are stepping over and no one is paying attention to. I said, the homelessness population has ballooned. And I said, and it's been fueled partly by gentrification in places like Brooklyn and Harlem. I was like, what are you all talking about? I said, this seems more like a policy and practice issue. And then somebody commented about, well, yeah, they're market solutions and all this other stuff. And I was just
unlocking capital.
Unlocking capital, all of that. So yeah, why don't you, I wanted you to come today, like to just share, because what I'm worried about is like, this is going to start happening more. And like more and more people, like people in the nonprofit world, especially people of color-led organizations, are going to be fed into this like social impact investing, and we're going to see it as a good thing. And just, wanting to talk about like what's really behind this idea of social impact investing, and certainly whose idea was it in the first place?
Yeah. Well, in some of our other conversations, I mentioned sort of that the words that you'll hear, initially they were started out as social impact bonds. And this idea of the social impact bond is actually predicated on this idea that started out in the mid-1990s of outcomes-based government contracts, which, you know, it doesn't sound bad, right? You're like, well, if the government was going to use our tax dollars to fund a service, you want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. I mean, I think that it's like a pay for performance contract, because clearly there are some times in which people get insider deals on contracting and they go to somebody's brother-in-law and they're not actually, you know, they're skimming money, or they're not providing the services. So at least on the surface, all of these things look good. It's just the execution. So in the mid 1990s, they had this structure that was started out by Arthur Rolnick, who is a chief economist at the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. And many of these policies are running through the central banking systems. So the Federal Reserve branches, of which Philadelphia has one. But Arthur Rolnick was at the Minneapolis Fed. So that's back in the mid 90s. And it's interesting because right around the same time, this was in the Twin Cities, it's when the charter schools were also birthed in the Twin Cities, exact same time. So if you start to reimagine that the charter schools are sort of like a flexible market-based opportunity of managing human capital, that there is a synergy there. Okay, that the market will flow, you know, that's how they tell us, you know, the market will, based solutions will win out for whatever is best for the people. But we also know that it's often structured to benefit those who are in power. So Sir Ronald Cohen is actually the father of British venture capital. And he's based in London, but he's a Harvard MBA. And so in the mid, you know, in like 2005 or 6, he used essentially the leftover assets, the unclaimed assets in the UK bank accounts. You'll hear about that occasionally, like, oh, here's in the newspaper, they have a big list. If you don't come and claim your unclaimed bank account, it goes into a fund. Well, what he did was he leveraged these unclaimed assets, and I think later maybe part of the lottery money, to create a pool of funds for social impact investing and these social impact bonds. And the very first one was at Peterborough Prison. And the premise of the social impact bond was that to reduce a future public expenditure, say that these individuals who were incarcerated, who were treated as part of a program, would not become reincarcerated. That was this justification for an investment in these people as human capital. So in this case, it was in people under, you know, within the judicial system in the United Kingdom. And they would say, well, rather than if these people go out in the world and they don't get support and they reoffend, they'll cost us more than if we provide them services now and they go out and they don't reoffend. And so there's a slice in between there that is negotiated between the nonprofit provider that's doing the social welfare intervention and the investor to be their profit, which doesn't seem like a very big deal. It doesn't seem like something that would be super profitable, because that cost differential, I mean, most people, if you said, you know what, all of the hedge funds in the world are looking at privatizing welfare and making a gazillion dollars, people would be like, tell me another one, right? Like, how in the world do you ever make money off of managing poverty? That doesn't seem very profitable. But
Poverty Inc. talks about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not everybody, but for most people think like maybe you make some money, but could you make a lot of money? But the lot of money is, once I started looking into this, it was all linking back to hedge funds. So it wasn't simply these investors.
What were some of the hedge funds that they were linking back to, if you can think of them?
I think like in the UK, like Marshall Wace, which is also behind Brexit. But in the United, so Michael Bloomberg looked at this model and he brought the Peterborough Prison Social Impact Bond to New York. And the first one in the United States was at Rikers Island, and it was for youth reoffending. And it turns out actually that this social impact bond was found to not work. It didn't meet its target outcomes. But if you actually have access to the paper from Stanford Business School that looked at it as a case study, in the fine print, it said that the reason that it didn't work, it wasn't found to meet its success metrics, was that the pool of young people in the pilot program dropped too low. So it voided the whole thing. So essentially what they're saying is it failed because they did not have enough incarcerated youth to experiment on. And so once you get that logic, right, like once you understand that the logic of the system, that you'll realize the answer, the reality.
They need bodies. They need bodies
to resolve poverty.
Yeah. So they need bodies.
They need the bodies. They need people in trauma. They need people to be managed. And so eventually they've piloted these all over the country. So Michael Bloomberg was working with Behavioral Insights team, the nudge unit in the UK. He installed Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, the nudge. They came in under Obama. Nudging, behavioral economics became really big. And so there's an outlet in New York, and there's one in Harvard Kennedy School, and then Harvard Kennedy School is threading it through all the mayors all over the United States and in the EU and in India, this what works data-driven government. And it's deeply embedded in Philadelphia. They call it what works government. There's entities like evidence-based solutions. It's all data-driven. And so what's happened between the mid-1990s until present is that you have much more sophisticated technological systems, right? Like we've had the advent of cloud computing. We've had the advent of data analytics. Now we have the advent of wearable technology. Now we have the advent of digital identity. And so they've been able to actually, rather than, in the nonprofit sector, most folks are like, well, again, you want people to be accountable ultimately, because again, sometimes there are organizations that take people's money that don't use the money the right way. But what they're doing is they're not going to solve the structural problem. They're going to push it onto the individual to fix themselves within a profoundly broken system that's been broken for centuries.
To blame the victim model, that's been like that for a while. You and I were discussing this on Twitter the other day. You were talking about like how poor people are now going to be managed by this crazy new system. And I'll let you like name what that is because I forgot it. But I was like, actually, some of this stuff actually started with 1996 welfare bill that,
and I think some of that was in the upper Midwest too, either Wisconsin or Minnesota.
It was Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin. Yeah. And I remember like this was when I first started doing work. Like this is when I actually first started like doing the advocacy work in Ohio. And there's an organization in Ohio called Policy Matters Ohio, and they're based in Cleveland. And they would do a lot of work on legislation at the state level. And our thing was mainly school discipline, school to prison pipeline, like the schools, like in making sure that schools are operating right for Black children and their families. And then I remember, like, as I was working in my community, all of these parents who were poor and working class would have issues like with Ohio's welfare system, the TANF program and all of this. And I started thinking about ways that we could partner with some other organizations. And I remember I reached out to Policy Matters and I said, hey, are you guys doing any kind of work to reform the way welfare is given out to communities in Ohio? And she said, oh no, we lost that fight in 1996. And basically we've decided to work on other things. And I just remember how my mouth dropped.
Right.
And the other thing that I've noticed about a lot of organizations like that they're basically appendages of the Democratic Party. It's like, if it's not a part of the Democratic Party platform, which poor people aren't, let's just be honest about that, they don't work on it. And it's all bullshit. I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, and that's the other piece of this is it's economic dispossession, right? And so through the 90s and you had the drug war, you had the growth of the prison industrial complex, but that was in relation to globalization and automation of labor. So the labor market was changing. They weren't going to absorb and retrain workers. And so to manage populations and to keep them under control and to create new profit centers, then you fed people into social welfare systems, into the prison systems, and that was the way of managing that human capital. And so now what's pivoting, and what I've mentioned before, is that the fourth industrial revolution that they're talking about coming out of Davos and the World Economic Forum, they're talking AI, quantum computing, robotics, advanced manufacturing. They're not planning on there being many human workers, or they're planning on the next generation of us to train the robots. Like instead of training somebody in a call center, like an immigrant or something, like we're training the robot to do the work. And so all of these people are going to be at loose ends at a level that they're not going to build enough prisons. They cannot build enough of those prisons. And so they're going to just throw up the satellites and fit everybody with a Fitbit to track them around and create a new business opportunity in biosurveillance, really, and behavior analytics is what I think. And so now at this point, like we're all, people trying to make it on the Underground Railroad, or we're all Lakota, like we're all people who are going to be, it's the enclosure of the commons. And even though the commons in the United States didn't belong to Europeans, but it's an enclosure system. We're seeing just this past couple of weeks, right? The pass systems coming to Israel with the Green Pass, and then the Daily Pass in the Los Angeles schools, and the Excelsior Pass in New York State. And these digital pass systems are rolling out, and it has a racialized history. And I hear very few people talking about.
Can you talk more about? So real quickly, I wanted to go back to your point about like how this new economy is just going to be all AI and automation. It's there. So as you know, because I've been completely upfront with you, as you know, that I have been participating in this whole investment world, and I see so much of what you're talking about there. But I just had a recent experience last week where my email was hacked, and the only and my only financial, so it was my personal email. So like everything, on my personal email is connected to my personal stuff. And so the only app-based financial service that I was using was an app called Coinbase, and that is like with the cryptocurrencies and stuff. So like Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff like that, because Bitcoin is called the new digital gold. It's considered like the commodity, because gold is a commodity, gold and silver, and they're saying because Bitcoin has an infinite amount, it's considered digital gold. So anyway, I'm painting the picture for people who are listening, right?
Yeah.
That was the only platform that allowed the hacker to penetrate it. Not my personal bank account, not my
that's
credit
supposed
card.
to be so secure.
It's supposed to be so. But here's the thing: my experience, Alison, has been met with nothing but this BS automation and artificial intelligence. They don't have human beings. It's nuts.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is what the fuck Alison is warning people about. It's already happening. Credit card companies are soon going to be doing the same thing. Banks are going to be doing the same thing. I think, and I was thankful because I was able to walk into, and I know they're horrible, but I was able to walk into a Chase bank to tell them to unlink my account to Coinbase. But to this day, Alison, no one's ever responded. I have not been able to get in touch with an actual human being. They finally responded to me via email, but it's so impersonal. You know what I mean? It's so like when you're dealing with somebody's money, you should be able to talk to somebody, damn it.
Right. Well, what's, and I'm sorry that happened to you. I mean,
I know, but that's why I keep bringing you here, because we have to continue to warn our people who are, and I'm like one of those people who, clearly I don't come from wealth. My family, we're descendants of Africans who were enslaved in the United States. So people like me would be like first generation middle class and all of that shit. So, of course I'm looking at ways, to
you want to
figure out new ways how to make money.
Intergenerational transfer, right?
So, and I want to warn, because there's a bunch of Black folks out there, and I've shared some of them, but there's a bunch of us who are like new investors just in the last several years. And I'm trying to warn people, especially at the crypto space, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on blockchain, and I hope we can talk about that. But they're going to get a lot of people just like me, and we're going to just be stuck. I've contacted a lawyer, but Coinbase needs to be sued. These companies, I think we need to have laws that say, you can't just artificial intelligence every damn thing. You can't just get rid of humans out of every damn interaction. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. And I mean, one of my concerns, I had a conversation a few weeks back with some folks about the GameStop, and the Robinhood app. And, we'll have to see. Like, my intuition is pretty good on some of these things, but, I have to say, in the 2019 national meeting of the NAACP, and that was where they passed that resolution that would oppose requiring a blockchain identity to access public services. Wow. And, so I was having a close look at that meeting, and that first day of the opening of the national meeting, they actually had welcomed the head of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was there in
at the
first,
NAACP?
yes.
Okay.
The first day, like maybe it wasn't the very first one, but he was in the first queue of presenters at that meeting. And then shortly thereafter, it turns out that the church was working with a group in Chicago for low-income communities, on the South Side or whatever, about financial literacy. Okay. And so, and I've been hearing a lot, even in Philadelphia, and tied to people who are part of getting housing assistance, that they're required to jump through all these hoops and go to all these classes, and that some of them are about financial literacy classes. And again, the problem with people who are in that situation is they don't have enough money and they're not paid enough, not that they're running around making bad decisions, right? But if you can recreate this finclusion, this literacy structure as a way of surveilling people and controlling people, that feeds into this overarching trajectory that we have of dehumanizing individuals, especially, people who don't have a lot of money. And you can boss them around and tell them whatever, because what other choice do they have? And so this financial literacy is being baked into the housing assistance program. I'm seeing this stuff with the NAACP and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which has very deep investments in technology and biotech specifically, and that now they're going to train people in financial literacy. So I'm looking at what happened with GameStop and the apps, because honestly, like, I'm not in that space and I don't know anything about investing apps, but I heard several.
I'm in that space and I can help you with it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I'm actually transferring out of Robinhood, but yeah, I actually have a Robinhood account.
Yeah. So I guess some people, like, depending on what you get into, you can get burned pretty bad, and so my concern is that if all of this is being set up like a game, if you imagine some kind of crazy video game that you're Maze Runner or something, right? And all the poor people are lined up and they've got to run the gauntlet to try to, like, of the nonprofit complex. If part of running this game is managing your finances, and the finances you have are not ever going to be enough to support yourself and your family, maybe they're going to hook up with
They only want to give you $1,000 for UBI.
Exactly.
Which
Who's going to live on $1,000 with it? Yeah, no, it's not happening. But I can totally see them saying, well, let us train you in doing online investing. Maybe you can leverage your $1,000 into $3,000, right? And then so they get they hijack poor people into feeding into these games, these like investment games, which again can go horribly wrong if you don't really understand the game that's being played. And so, I can't prove that that's how it's going, but these, when you see things moving together, like, why did the NAACP have, the prophet of the LDS church there? Why are they working on the South Side on financial literacy? Why is everyone focused on financial literacy? This is not 10 or 15 years ago when you would go in and tell high school kids going into college, hey, don't take out too many credit cards. Like, it's not that they're trying to tell people. So where is this going, knowing that the app-based, individual entrepreneurial, that is the bootstrap that is being sold to people. Here, get this app. You too can, like, strike gold, in the Bitcoin mines. So. Yeah. Striking gold in the Bitcoin mines. Yeah. I mean, so Bitcoin, I got to be honest with you. I first opened that Coinbase account back in 2017, and I'm already, I just, said earlier, I'm already a skeptical person. So Bitcoin, like, wasn't that ubiquitous as it is now. And even back then, I learned about it from other Black people that I actually do trust. But I didn't necessarily trust the app. So I played around and I think I might have put $100 in it. And I actually forgot about it. They end up sending me an email in 2020, early 2020, saying, hey, we're going to close this account. If you don't log in. Because I'm like, man, I don't have any extra money, and I don't have money to lose. Right. Like, I get it and all that. And then I start seeing all of this, like, financial, because I follow like the CNBCs and all of that. And I listen to these podcasts. One of them is called CoinDesk, and all of these people. And then it start like shooting through the roof. Like, literally in 2020, the earliest part of 2020, I think Bitcoin was like at $2,500. Now it's over $50,000.
So
But see, but this is also syncing with this shift to the central bank digital currencies, right? And so like,
wow.
this is my question is, you've got Bitcoin showing up on the heels of the last global economic crash, right? Oh, it's anonymous. We don't know who created this crazy encrypted system, right? But isn't it great? Isn't it liberatory? And so it kind of bubbles along for a while. And then just as the Federal Reserve systems are shifting into their version, they're feeding everyone into this system to normalize it. And my sense is that there's nothing to say that they're not going to crash the independent system and make that not available. And then everyone's used to, doing on the app, and then just feed them into this digital system that they don't have control of. And that very few people operating in this space understand that the digital assets held on blockchain are about a token economic system in which ultimately, the goal is to tokenize every aspect of ourselves as data and to tokenize our rights and privileges and to create a massive caste system of, people being defined by what you have in your digital wallet, which isn't simply just cash. It's, do you have the right to get on a bus? What is your health status? Like your medical, what is your injection status?
You didn't get the vaccine, so you should be shunned.
All of that is going to be tokenized, and people are not making that connection that there's something coming called the spatial web.
What?
So I know, right? Nobody tells you about this stuff. So the spatial web is essentially, if you imagine what happened with early internet, that you had hyperlinks, right? And how that was, if you remember back to that day, how it was kind of, oh, look, there's layers of information here. I can read a document and I can click on it and it opens a new file and I can click on that and it's layered, right? And so now we just don't even think about it. We don't think about tabs and clicks and hyperlinks. But what is about to happen is that infrastructure is going to pivot into the physical world. So instead of hyperlinks on your phone or on your laptop or whatever, it's actually going to be the way in which you interface with your physical environment will be layered with data. And your ability to access the data or manipulate it or interface with the physical environment will be dependent on what you have in your wallet. So these QR codes, it's all of that. It's micro contracts. It's almost like your whole existence is predicated on signing up for mini contracts that demand to say, do you qualify for this privilege? Show me your papers.
Okay, so can we be like filing lawsuits now? Because one of the things I was concerned about, as I told you, I see it everywhere. I'm like working statewide, here in Maryland around like police reform stuff. And so I'm like, and because of COVID, like Maryland's General Assembly is now meeting on YouTube. So like
you can't even get to that. You can't even.
Right. And you literally watch like the hearings, the judicial proceedings hearings is the ones that I've been paying attention to. And it caught my ear because there was this company that was, and this senator that was pitching like this new technology that doesn't require humans like to deliver things to people and all of this. And there was another senator who was like, well, in Pennsylvania, they decided not to regulate it. These people are pitching shit and they don't even want it regulated. But
no, imagine once they put spy cameras on the rolling around robot coolers,
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this, but it was a Republican senator that kind of pushed back and was like, well, I'm concerned about like privacy and things like that. I think we need to have the Maryland Department of Transportation tell us what kind of regulations we need.
I mean, in Philadelphia, you can be like given a ticket if you ride your bicycle on the sidewalk, but you can have a robot on the sidewalk. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, in Philadelphia, granted, optimally, bikers should be in, have a safe place to ride on the street, like in there. But like, no, they can totally ticket you for being like on a bike on a sidewalk in the city of Philadelphia, but they'll let a robot out there. That's, yeah. And so part of what I'm trying to navigate in the space is that, it's a lot of conservatives and even like the constitutionalists. And even though my framing is that we're here because the Constitution was written in such a way that Black people, Indigenous people are not treated as human, right? So now, guess what? We're all that. Like, it's a trajectory. Still, it is something. I do realize that if we just threw away, the globalists would come in and come up with something much worse. But the libertarians, the constitutionalists, the conservatives, I'm saying these smart contracts with the physical environment, this spatial web idea that's linking your digital identity to your ability to be in a physical world in the public realm, will supersede all of our civil rights. And so where are the lawyers who are really into the Constitution? Because it's almost like creating a layer above. You can't even get down to the Constitution anymore because this layer of contracts will never even let you get down there. And then increasingly, I think the contracting system will be predicated on what your biological status is through these biotech sensors.
And is that what you have to do before you fly now, and the stuff that they're doing in LA schools? Can you back up and talk about what's happening? What is the pass for LA schools? What is that about?
Yeah. Well, so I will go into this some. I have a long presentation with Kevin Jenkins of Urban Global Health Alliance. So it's on my YouTube channel. People have some slides and things that go into Daily Pass specifically. So we talked about that for about an hour and a half. But generally speaking, and I saw this coming like last April, I was already writing about, is this the COVID, the excuse to trigger a biometric identity system? Because I'd been following this for at least 3 years, and it was starting in the humanitarian, like global development aid space, particularly around, it was being targeted in Africa, and it was being targeted on the Syrian refugee population. And they were, through the United Nations and UNICEF, they were collecting people's biometrics like retinal scans and linking it to a digital identity on blockchain, okay? And they were framing it as convenience, right? How convenient it is that you don't need a wallet, you just blink at the thing, pay. But like, once you have that system, imagine, your email being hacked. Imagine what happens when all of your biometrics, something happens and it gets hacked. You can't change your biometrics. You can't change your retinal scan. It's not like a password you can change. There's very serious considerations. And so I had seen this coming for several years, and I originally had thought it was coming with educational transcripts and free college and dual enrollment college. I would, based on what MIT was doing with blockchain transcripts and community college, I thought that's where it was going to come. I had no idea about pandemic. And so with this global health rollout, now they can frame the need to have a digital identity as, treating it as a biosecurity threat, right? They have set up a system in which healthy people are now framed as a possible threat unless they have a digital documentation that they're not according to guidelines that are set by the very people who are managing the concentrated wealth of the world. So, and that's kind of how it is. We've all bought into it at this point. Like, so many people have bought into the fear of healthy people, that you can say, well, unless you can show that in this moment, since yesterday, you didn't get some disease that you're going to use to kill me, you're a threat to me. And it also alienates us from each other. God. So now they can kind of force people, like the early pilot for this was Aadhaar in India. That was an early phase biometric, and that was backed by Gates, because their goal was to get the global unbanked into a digital currency system. So India was their target because they had both a pretty technologically advanced professional class, but many, many poor people who never had bank accounts. And this sort of off the books economy was something they want to shut down. And so their goal with that demonetization, where they said everybody has to come and bring their $100 bills in, their equivalency in. When you came and there were, like, you would have to stand in line for a week to trade your hard currency, in for this new system, they would go down the line and say, well, you can stand in this line for a week, or if you just sign up for a digital account, we'll set up your Coinbase account, or, whatever the equivalent on the Aadhaar account. And so that was their trigger event to sort of force this shift that was then attached to a thumbprint biometric. So this has been rolling for several years, and now, clearly they must feel that they're in a position of starting to scale it, which I think will still be like a 3 to 5 year process. But when I was talking about the global prison planet, once they have the robots do all the work, how do we manage the people? We're not going to build prisons for them. Now we're going to just turn the world into a prison with wearable technology and
With
satellites.
biosecurity.
But we will track you with your wearable technology because we will compel you to have a pass system. And knowing that history, that deep history of controlling populations and their mobility through the passes. So that's the slave pass. That's the pass on, Indian reservations. That's the apartheid pass system. It's an enclosure. It's an enclosure to the point that they can use the digital GPS coordinates to, in real time, geofence you into certain locations and control how you can interface with the physical world. So right now they're just dribbling little bits of information in, like, oh, you need here, look how convenient on your phone, you get a QR code and you can just get on the plane if you have an up-to-date PCR test, that a COVID test or what have you. And this technology was backed by the Rockefeller Foundation, which has its history in, all of the global health, public health scenarios, the allopathic medicine, and also the World Economic Forum, which is pushing the whole agenda. And there were several people attached to that who were coming out of Cornell Technion in New York City. So like they're starting with the airplane thing, and people are like, wait, well, I might be able to live with that. Like, I like to go to London. Like, I'll put, swab, get the pass on my phone. But they're not realizing that the next product that they have is controlling access to work and education. The next product they have is real-time data analytics, which is probably, nanotech biosensors. They're just, the media is touted with just giving you a tiny bit. And so the common pass is the rollout. And it's interesting because the first flight, it was, Raul Diego has a really good piece with Mint Press, and it's called Bits and Bytes. It's part of this Icarus series about racial capitalism. I highly recommend it. He's like the first journalist who's actually dug into this material, and he speaks about Justin Leroy's work.
What's his name again?
Raul Diego and Mint Press, and it's one of his latest
Mint Press, Raul Diego. Okay.
Yeah, Bits and Bytes, and it's, I think, like the Silicon Icarus. And so it's about racial capitalism and social impact investing. It's a very good piece, very well researched. And he talks about this first flight for Common Pass went from London Heathrow to Newark.
The rise of digital currencies 2 days ago.
Pardon me?
The article you're talking about is this. It says rise of digital currencies in human capital markets.
I think. Well, that was an interview, and then there's a print piece that is, I think, maybe March 4th. On Mint Press, that isn't it? It's a print piece. It has an Icarus image.
This one is let me just I want to make sure people get it. So
make sure people share that around, because that was
let me put it in the chat.
He built on, we had a good conversation, and then he added a lot of layers. And so he talked about a previous article he'd written about the Common Pass, and that one of the gentlemen, part of that, his name was Brad Perkins, I believe, who was the architect of the pass architecture, who is involved in a lot of bioinformatics tracking and Epstein and eugenics. I mean, it keeps coming back. We talked to, Jeff about like the eugenics element,
right.
But people are not linking the mobility to the eugenics, to the bioinformatics, to the fact that you could, against your will, be bioengineered, without informed consent and perhaps against your will.
Mm-hmm. We don't have informed consent right now, is what I feel. Like the CDC, I don't know if you saw that, but the CDC, I guess, released some guidance on January 26th that you can't fly unless you get a test. You can't even board a plane unless you have a test, even though you're healthy. Otherwise, you haven't had any symptoms, like none of that, but you still have to get a test. And one of the things that I was concerned about is as for people who may be familiar with the story of Henrietta Lacks, who was a Black woman that John Hopkins made millions of dollars on, they stole her DNA and profited off of it and made all these different medicines and all this shit. And I'm like, what's happening to people's DNA from these tests?
Well, it's interesting. So I have a friend who is a special education teacher in New York City, and he's been very active about, advancing that people should have health, medical choice and bodily autonomy about this, both for teachers and for students in the school system. And he had pursued legal action because the contracts with the testing companies are not necessarily public. And when they were trying to get the contracts to look over what was happening with the biological sample for the New York City schools, which is a giant school district, it were very shady. No one was really surfacing these contracts. And it turns out they weren't just with the school district, they were with the health department. And so finally, after being pressed legally, they surfaced these contracts. And then they won, in court. The contract said that they weren't supposed to use the sample for anything other than the test itself. But it didn't specifically say that the sample had to be destroyed. Okay. And so there was concern that if they were able to retain a DNA bank of information indefinitely, that at some point the laws could change in how that would make them perhaps, and not saying it definitely would, but unless you specifically say it has to be destroyed, there are concerns. Because again, with people's biometrics and knowing that these bioinformatic and the biotech and life sciences companies, that is gold to them, these DNA sequences, that we shouldn't all be having our stuff harvested to profit companies we don't even know about.
Like CRISPR Technologies, and I'm familiar with them because of the finance industry. There is a investment firm called ARK Invest, and they released last month their big ideas, and genomics is a huge part of it. And they have ARK-G is one of their ETFs, and CRISPR Technologies is the top holding in that. And when I looked into CRISPR Technologies, I said, I'd be damned. This is exactly what Alison is talking about. Well, and the thing is, it's coming out of
the University of Pennsylvania did the first human CRISPR trials last fall, I believe.
And Biden appointed the man. Biden appointed the man who was who was a part of that. I believe he was the lead researcher to a cabinet level position.
Yeah, so I mean, it's big money, and people are not understanding it as a market, and they're not understanding the sophisticated level. I recommend James Giordano. He is a professor at Georgetown, and he does a lot of speaking to the military and defense interests, and he speaks about DNA and neurotech, neurological tech, control of the mind, and about a future of DNA targeted biowarfare. That's the future of warfare, is DNA based biowarfare, and that specifically targeting people's bodily functions and their mental functions. Okay. I mean, I think the ultimate war game winner is if you could just disable your enemy and you don't have to waste any ammunition on them. And so
I found him. He's in their
he's a pretty scary dude. He has a lot of talks. And so if you're not familiar with nanorobotics, biosensors, frequency, there are many people who are, there's a whole community of targeted individuals who have been, these things have been tried on for a long time. And they're very open about that is the plan, is DNA targeted targeting of individuals and populations. And so again, can you hear me? Oh,
sorry, I'm on mute. So they're targeting people down to the DNA level. They're going to target people. This is nuts.
I mean, he says that is the future of warfare. Now, am I saying, but people should be really, really cautious. I mean, I keep thinking take care of your hairbrush. What kind of DNA material are you leaving around? Your toothbrush, your hairbrush, or but seriously, this idea that even in Philadelphia, that children would be, and in New York City schools, they actually, my friend Michael pressed successfully that they were doing random testing of kids, and I believe it was the long swab version of young kids, even kindergarten, without their parents, and people in the hazmat suits, and kids were terrified. And what he said was,
without their parents' knowledge, they sticking stuff up kids' nose in New York.
Yeah, it's same in Philadelphia. They're and if
criminal.
You refuse, they say you don't get to go to school.
This is why I've been telling Black people, take your damn kids out of these damn schools.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, a lot of people are, But even so, this next version will be if you want to do school anywhere but your kitchen table and go to the library or some other place in the future, you're going to still have to present this stupid passport and still get tested somewhere. You know what I mean? So we have to build a whole other structure. But for now, yeah, like, and I have to say, I'm very heartened by teachers standing up for kids and saying, listen, this is, kids should be able to opt out. If you don't want your kid tested at school, if it's a random sampling, you should be able to say, I don't want that, right? It's a bodily choice, especially for minors. And so that was accomplished, but there are a lot of people who
are
feel
the
very
tests
under pressure.
themselves linked also to global markets? Like, is that why they want the testing data?
Well, so this is the thing about Daily Pass. So we talked about Common Pass, which is the airport piece, the mobility piece, and knowing that it's connected to work and school, and then real-time health data analytics. The other piece is so the Daily Pass is a product that was developed for, it was first adopted by the Los Angeles Unified School District, but that's like one of the largest school districts in the country. So I think we can see a lot of other districts falling into line once that gets into place. And so it was done in partnership with Microsoft and Anthem Health. And so the thing about Anthem Health is that they're one of the largest membership-based managed care providers in the country. And they're the sort of the exclusive provider with 14 states, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they're a very big player in this space, okay? So, we've got Microsoft is developing this. Now, I was just creating a map today, and I'm gonna share it with, if people wanna make sure that later today they check my blog, Wrench in the Gears, I'm gonna connect it with the
I'm gonna put your website in this chat.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm gonna post it later this afternoon, this map that I'm making. But, Microsoft, we already know about Bill Gates and his investments and, the prison industrial complex and GMO seeds and education privatization and all of those elements. His Steve Ballmer, also from Microsoft, was connected with Strive and the human capital markets and the social welfare dashboards. But Microsoft is the company. I mean, they are invested in, they've got LinkedIn, they're tracking your human capital. They've got Minecraft, so they're building digital worlds and digital economies, Minecraft education, getting the kids coding this virtual prison planet. They're working on a planetary computer under the guise of sustainability and climate change. They have the gaming element and the Xbox and the Kinect, I think, which was leveraging people's biometric movements while they're playing games into gait analysis for surveillance cameras that they're working on with Michael Bloomberg and the domain awareness system, right? So like while you're playing the game,
that's not informed consent. People aren't playing these games.
None of it.
That's not informed consent.
I know.
This is not. So if people knew that they were going to use that against them later, maybe they wouldn't have bought the fucking game.
I know. People don't. And then so Microsoft has funded the University of Washington to do data storage in DNA and
DNA storage.
Yes. Readable and writable.
That's where all the testing
are. Right now it's synthetic. They're saying that they're using a DNA structure because it's so efficient at storing DNA. And if we talk about the spatial web, there's so much data, it has to go somewhere. So they're creating synthetic data, but it's unclear, again, how is that going to interface? Their goal is a cyber-physical environment where carbon-based life and silicon engineering start to meld. And so like, who's to say what's going to happen in the future? They just launched this week something called Microsoft Mesh, which is mixed reality. So look, you and your friends from different parts of the world can go to a concert together as your avatars. They've patented, creating chat bots based on real people. They have AI health. Like this is all what Microsoft is doing. And so if you look at this bigger picture and say, oh, by the way, Microsoft would just like to have your child answer a daily set of health questionnaires and turn them into a QR code to allow them to go to school. And so this premise is that the platform, that there's a health portal that children daily to go to school in person will answer a health questionnaire. Again, it's unclear, does that mean every kid is doing it at home on a device? And are they doing it in the presence of a parent? Are they just like told to do it? They're supposed to print out this QR code. Weekly, they're supposed to have a test, viral test, whatever test it's going to be, because, this isn't going away after COVID for sure, and upload those results. and then they're supposed to schedule their injection through this portal, which is unclear if this portal is a blockchain electronic health record, who's holding the data. Clearly they would want to frame it as secure and private. So my sense is that they're probably going to sell it to us as a blockchain electronic health record, but that isn't clear. And in my opinion, just the idea, because children are not major transmitters of this, especially asymptomatic kids, it's a collective trauma. It's like trauma-based mind control. Every day it's Munchausen by proxy. Are you sick? Are you sure you're not sick? You might be sick. You might kill your parents. And that's this sort of propaganda video, a 5-minute video that was put out by the superintendent of the Los Angeles Public Schools. And when I looked into him, I think his name is Austin Buettner. His background is in finance, financial investment advising. And he was a partner with, I believe, Morgan Stanley and BlackRock. So one of the world's largest asset managers. So this guy is not an educator. He's totally not an educator. He's someone who's involved in democratic politics and international policy and global finance, and he's not an educator. And he's partnered with Microsoft, that we know is about, making money in all of these sectors of gaming and data analytics and healthcare and virtualization. And I think it's really a problem. And the other piece about this is that people are thinking, like, many people circulated this video and said, this is really concerning. This daily pass is very concerning.
Right.
What most people didn't get is that once they set up the digital identity to the QR code, they can start layering other information in. And Los Angeles schools and the United Teachers of Los Angeles, the union there, is very big into the community school model. So now when you start delivering services in a school-based setting, Obama gutted FERPA, which is the data privacy rights in schools. He put a bunch of loopholes in there for the impact investors. And so when you start delivering health services, mental health services, social welfare services, not in a clinical setting where HIPAA would apply, but in the school, those kids and those families have much reduced protection of their data. And then there's my concern is that what they're not
UTLA.
Real people. They're not going to get a real face-to-face nurse to hold their hand and make them feel better, like when they have a runny nose. No, they're going to get somebody on a screen who's pulling their data out to commodify them as data and to manage them as human capital. And that's simply the way this model is going to go. And it's going to be very hard for any individual, even well-intentioned people, even well-intentioned social workers, well-intentioned school-based healthcare providers, to do the right thing, because the whole system has been set up for quite a few years to be predatory on really vulnerable kids. And we saw what happened in DC, where they, passed the law where 11-year-olds are supposed to consent to medical procedures.
Against community input. Crazy. Lots of people in the community in DC pushed back on that, but they weren't listened to, as always. When poor and working class Black folks say, hey, I don't want this, it's usually like, F y'all, you're going to get what we give you. We're going to be allowed to do whatever we want to do to you. So no, they did not listen to the community when they pushed back on allowing kids to get vaccinated 12 and older without their parents' knowledge. Not even their parents.
And suppressing it, I think. Yeah.
And they're suppressing it.
So, but that's just the beginning. Everyone just thinks it's just this one thing. No, it is not just this one thing. It is about dispossession by robots. Who figured, right? Like, who thought we were, not just robots, but avatars, like we're going to be replaced by a digital twin of us that Microsoft is going to control, right? And I mean, that's their idea. And that's why, I mean, for me, I feel really strongly, and this is, what it resonates with Kevin, is coming from a place of like spirit and faith. And I'm not whoever is there are two paths here. There's a scorched path and a green path, right? There's a path of natural life and something that is based in a world that is bigger than just science and human beings, that has a greater power. And then there are those who would do that. Humans and this white Western scientism knows everything, even though we know they make terrible mistakes,
all the time.
And that there's
thankfully people have pointed out Johnson & Johnson, this new shot that's been approved. So thankfully the meme people, lots of people have pointed out, oh, is this the same Johnson & Johnson that couldn't get the powder right? No, thanks.
Yeah.
Because they were sued, you remember?
Yeah, well, the asbestos in the baby powder, the pelvic
Exactly,
neck.
the
I
powder,
mean,
right?
they were sued by the state of Oklahoma because
Yep,
their subsidiary developed a poppy that contributed to the opioid crisis. Like
yep,
they were fined very high level new type of pop, like super poppy, to
yep,
trigger like addiction. And they got fined by the attorney general of the state of
yep.
Oklahoma. Like they
Oklahoma,
are
yep.
criminal enterprises, actually. Straight up.
Exactly. It's a criminal enterprise and people are ready to sign up for a shot.
I mean, and the hard thing is, so yesterday, I've given some talks about wellness with Sarah G has been very generous in giving me his space, and he's a holistic health practitioner. And he got put on for some group that is targeting people as hate crimes. And so they're
What?
targeting all of these anti-vax. They framed everybody as if you have a question
Anti-vax,
about the
yeah.
system, you're anti-vax, and they have a hit list. They literally, the anti-hate group had a hit list of people they were going after to deplatform, and they had Robert F. Kennedy, and they had about 10 of them, and Sarah was on there, and his wife was on there, and they put this out, and I said, listen, like, one, are we about censorship? Two, do you remember the McCarthy era? Three, do you think people can't vet their own information or should have access to all of
We
the
should have gatekeepers to tell
choice?
us, oh, this is the information that we want out. Right?
Right.
Like we can't be smart enough, like you said, to vet our own information. It has to be given the stamp of approval from the same people who are going to make billions of dollars off of all of this shit.
Yeah. And I mean, actually it was kind of ironic because most of the people, and they were trying to frame the people who were questioning this agenda and pigeonhole them into a certain type of dangerous, radical, right wing. And I'm like, no, like these generalizations are not actually helpful. And what we're trying to do is give information to broaden things out. So do your homework first, and before you start making sweeping, no group is monolithic. And if you try to suppress information without actually understanding who you're talking about, and I'm telling you that you don't actually have the full picture. And this woman, she was just caught up in the mainstream media feed. Like I couldn't break her out of it. I was trying to be kind to say like, hey, like there's more to this world. Like there is work to be done. This work is moms against
This is psychological
AI
warfare.
I would like to have you on board, right?
Alison, it's psychological warfare. And I don't know if you've like been paying attention to the recent, and I think the timing is really funny, but like Judas and the Black Messiah, which really got into like COINTELPRO and how the FBI targeted Black-led, like the Panthers, basically really went after the Panthers. And then also just recently was a story of Billie Holiday, where they used the FBI to target her as well. And I think that is very interesting, like that these things are being dropped now. But like those, like people like me, like I would say in the Pan-African community or Black nationalist community, like we've always known like the government can't be trusted, like the government targets Black people. Like, it was the Nation of Islam who even warned back in the 90s when Joe Biden's crime bill, they was like, this is not about crime. This is about targeting Black people. This is about caging Black bodies, particularly Black men. This isn't about what you think it's about. Right. And of course, the Nation of Islam has also been targeted for lots of things and has been deplatformed. In fact, Minister Farrakhan was one of the first people that was deplatformed. And as you know, I don't know if you know this, but the NOI is also warning, they're the biggest organization in this country that's telling Black people to be warned about Johnson & Johnson and all of these people.
Yeah. I mean, this history, it continues. I mean, it's similar playbooks, and I think they don't really want, they want people at each other's throats, right? They want to pit individual groups against one another. And I have to say, like, people come at me and they say, oh, people must say terrible things about you. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm trying to tell the truth. And I'm not here to decide for you or to tell you that I have your answer and you need to listen to me because I know better. But I have information that people need to make a more informed choice about the path they choose for themselves and their families. And it's, I have been I'm a conduit. I'm still learning. People share information with me. We collaborate. Everybody has different pieces of the puzzle. And so, I just wrote on my blog last night, I was trying to, people are like, it's just too much. Where do I even start? And I had a list of
it's a lot.
things. And I said, if you want to crawl around in my brain for a while and see what's in there, the 15 things that I would want you to take away, here are these 15 things. But in a foundational level is that, power is concentrated. This technology is advanced beyond our ability. Not that we had great ethics before. It's gone way beyond our ability.
They got too much power, Alison. The other thing that we haven't talked about is Facebook is shadow banning me. I shared this video on my public figure page, and people were like, I can't see it. They screenshotted it, and it showed where Facebook had banned, you couldn't see the video. The other thing that's been happening to me on the page where you and I are friends is that Facebook now, since this new administration has come in, what I have noticed is that Facebook will ban certain features and they'll say, well, you can't do this. But they used to provide here's a screenshot of what you did. They don't even do that anymore. They're just you can't do this. So now I can't post in groups. I can't comment on things in groups that I'm a part of. They stopped me from sharing links last week. I couldn't share any links, and they didn't give me a reason why. They just said, you can't share links until Thursday at 9:00 a.m.
Well, and so imagine.
And they got so much power.
But think about your experience both with hacking and your financial app.
They're coming after me.
So imagine this spatial web, the Microsoft mesh, right? Microsoft's going to have your DNA, maybe, and your chat bot and your, version of yourself and your synthetic being in the planetary computer, and that your ability to be in a physical world is going to be contingent on compliance. And it's behaviorism. And one of the things that I think we've talked about, because you sent me links to appointments, right? So now, Black and brown people are being put in positions of authority over this system, right?
I told you, I've been noticing that for a year.
Right. And I mean, it's happened. And
Obama was the first test and he was wildly successful. Now we got to just get the right kind of Black, because they would never pick me. Let's be honest about that. They got to get the right kind of Black person to put in these certain positions. And I keep seeing it every single day, and they are flushing them with cash.
Yeah. I mean, so they, now that they've built the machine, I mean, it's a racialized machine, and they know that in order for them to take it to the next level, they need it implemented in a certain kind of way.
And they're going to have Black faces and say, oh, it's just not racist. It's not racist. No, we're not targeting certain people. They're Black. Look, we got Black leaders.
Right.
And we have diversity, equity,
and
inclusion.
Itself is an impact market. So that's, we got into this talking about the social impact investing scene, right? The framing of impact investing. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember which number it is. I can't remember if it's 8 or 11, but one of them is gaps and racial equity is baked into the sustainable development goals. These are, if you heard me before, it's all aligned to these sustainable development goals.
It's so sickening to me to hear Joe Biden talk about racial equity after he was the author of the crime bill. It's sickening to me.
I know. They figure people don't remember. I mean, I'm not saying Black people, but people
it's a whole lot of Black people that defended his ass too. Yeah, no, it's the Black bourgeois managerial class are the ones that pushed him on our community in this election. I don't care. I'm telling the truth.
Yeah. So they're going to implement this and call it equity, and then the impact investors are going to cheer and count it as a good investment. I mean, that's that, and that is what is happening, and I think the professionalization of the diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm hearing this from people too, is that whenever all of a sudden it's turn on the faucet, and not that I'm saying that's not important work that needs to be done, but when it's coming from a certain quarter and it's coming consistently all in one way, it's they've just decided now is the time, and that this equity and the inclusion, it's kind of the whole framing of impact. Several years ago, I went out and I stood outside Total Impact, which is an impact investing conference in Philadelphia. The previous year I had heard about it because I happened to be in a meeting in which over the box lunches, and I was the only regular person in this meeting. It was at Penn, and someone said, I don't even know how it came up in the conversation during the box lunches, like in the group conversation, someone said, Black people drink too much bottled water.
Black people
drink too much bottled, and that's a problem. Like, and I don't even how you have these things that you just remember, and I'm like, how did that even come up? Because there were these round tables, and this wasn't even at my table. And someone said, you know what? Over at the Sierra Center right now, the impact investors are all meeting, and I bet they'd have a solution to that problem. And then I thought, oh, wow, okay, this is, and I get put in places in certain times, I think, to see things like that. I was supposed to see this conversation. This is how, we don't care about Flint. We don't care about nothing. We just, it's climate and Black people drink too much bottled water. That's the problem. Impact. Send it to the impact investors. They'll get an app for that, right? Like they'll have an app for fix your drink too much bottled water. And so the next year it was at a different location. And I said, I'm showing up and protesting this. This was during the middle. My friend Jennifer Bennett was occupying the housing authority. She was going up against Department of Homeland Security as a, threat, a national threat, because she was protesting what the housing authority was doing or not doing for poor people in Philadelphia. And so I'm going to, and it was May 1st. It was May Day, for goodness sakes. I couldn't shake hardly, eventually Sherry Honkla came out, but there was not one left-leaning person in the city of Philadelphia on May Day would stand out in front of the impact investors and contest this narrative. So I've got my little bulletin board, and I put all the pictures of all the presenters, and I put their pictures out, and I said, this is what you're doing. If you're talking about total impact, and these are these, suits going into the, fancy office building, Center City, Philadelphia. And I said, people are not things to be impacted. Do you understand this at a fundamental level? People are not things. That you don't get to decide who you're impacting.
It's dehumanization. It's a continuation of dehumanizing these same populations.
Yeah. And so, I can't remember, but it's managing people as something on a dashboard that allows the people who are controlling these technological systems at arm's length. They don't have to deal with, the child who's hungry in the backseat of a car on someone's sofa doing their Chromebook school. They just care how that child is represented on a dashboard. And if they're pretty broken, that's fine by their bottom line, because if they can fix them as data, then that's a profit margin for them. And that's what I'm saying, is that this stakeholder capitalism, this social impact, we've got to figure out a different way. And as I shared in my talk with Kevin, and Ulysses Slaughter, someone I'm working with locally, and he had brought up, I was not aware of the Dr. King's discussion of thingification, to thingify people, to turn people into things. And this QR code. I
wasn't aware of that either.
The Daily Pass, and after he was
Daily Pass is an app.
Well, actually, you're supposed to print it out, I guess. I don't know. I guess if you're a kid with a smartphone, they probably put on the smartphone. You're like people who has an operating printer all the time on a daily basis, but Daily Pass, right? But it's this thingification, the reduction of people to a QR code that you can put on a dashboard. And the diversity, equity, inclusion piece several years ago, Ibram Kendi, who was, lifted up about anti-racism,
they
and that
really
all the liberal
lifted him up.
are doing his book, but he came to speak in Philadelphia because he got his graduate degree. He did his graduate work at Temple. And afterwards, I bought his book, and I wanted to tell him about Amply and putting kids in Cape Town on blockchain, the pre-K kids. And he never responded. But later he's working with these.
Of course not. He's a multimillionaire.
Impact investors. He's working with the impact investors. And I'm like,
which impact investors is he working with?
Well, he was.
Kendi.
So I'm trying to remember. I wrote a blog post about he was keynoting at this ed tech conference. And I said, listen, the people that you're working with are about, it's about open education resources. It's about data mining kids. It's about these playlists. It's connected to Rupert Murdoch and social impact bonds. And what you're saying, when you represented to me, you said the people who changed your life were your teacher and your coach and your friend who believed in you when you were in not a great place. They help you keep on that path, you know, and the stuff that you're fronting for here, if you look up on my blog, it's an open letter to Ibram Kendi. And I said,
everybody go to wrenchingthegears.com. I have it up on
if you look under search, you can put Kendi in. And of course, you know, it's like the Zach Bush letter. I got to put these people on notice. I'm saying the people you're working for are not, there's what the words that are used about equity inclusion, but is it on a dashboard? Does it involve Black kids being turned into a QR code and put on blockchain so that you can engineer equity? Is it engineered equity? Because to me, you know, and I can't speak on behalf of the Black community, but I can speak on behalf of the system of oppression that's rolling out. I don't think that that's justice.
No, it's not justice. We know what justice is. These people don't want to pay taxes. Like, I mean, you know, organizers for years, you know, have been pushing for more equity, and more equity is not centering wealth at the top 0.5%. The equity is that you redistribute the wealth. And certainly with this new fourth industrial revolution and economy, the money that people are making is from like la la land. It's like in the cloud. It's not that you're producing actual physical things to change and improve people's lives.
Yeah.
So capitalism,
it's global, right? I mean, and that's the thing.
Global.
At this point, it's not, and you know, that's the idea of blockchain and this globalization of 4.0. If they're going to put you in a VR headset and a haptic suit and make you run a factory halfway around the world, they need you to have a blockchain.
It's happening already. Did you see me tag you in that post where this guy gave an example of like how this robot was in another country and it looked like a kid who was in the VR headset and he was making the motions for him to put the food on the desk?
I put that on my post.
Did you see it?
About identification. Yeah, and it's Tokyo. There is cyborg.
It was Tokyo. Yeah.
But the AI will have to know who to give that job to, right? And it'll be dependent on what tokens you have in your digital wallet, and not just what skill do you have the skill to move your arms this way to, you know, put to stock the refrigerator case, but what kind of person are you? They want to know the behavioral skills, and all of that is going to be.
So if you're an activist like me, who's a rabble rouser, right? Like, so like they're going to
You're not getting tokens.
Yeah, they're going to punish me because, oh no, you're a rabble rouser. You know what I mean? Like,
how do you even organize if you're stuck in a VR headset and the robots go organize? Like, I don't even know how this works. And that's why the left is so miserable, in my opinion, is like they don't even know this stuff. Like, they should.
They don't want to know.
They don't want to know it. They don't want to know.
There are some significant people on the left who I have like tried to share like this information, and they want to put like people who are questioning everything into a right-wing box. Anybody who is like questioning authority, questioning the government, like anybody who's doing any of that now is suddenly a right-wing conspiracy. And Black people, our tradition is questioning. Our tradition is pushing back on these fuckers. And like you even have like Black liberals who are categorizing people who are questioning things as like a part of some right-wing conspiracy. It's completely nuts to me. I can't believe that is happening.
Well, I mean, I like to kind of
the Democratic Party itself.
Look at my stuff. If you understand my lens, this is racial capitalism. This is long legacy. This is logical extension. This system is really broken. But at the same time, white people have a responsibility to do something about it. So I'm not going to just sit back and not do anything about it because I'm just waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I can, you know, and if that involves going to Salt Lake City and telling people how to put kids on blockchain, if that involves talking to people in Israel and saying like, hey, you know, this smart technology that y'all are developing is going to backfire on your people too. Let's not build this thing. Let's not build society 5.0 cyborg avatar capitalism, please. Could we pause and reflect on the history together and start to heal it? Like that's, and I'm not saying that, you know, I'm entitled to be in spaces, y'all, you know, certain people want to go and do their own thing. You know, I respect that, but I'm not going to just not participate because I'm waiting for the invitation.
Amen. One of the things that I've been frustrated about, because I do have some friends who are like, you know, Black leftists or people that are in my network, I would say, not necessarily all of them are friends, but people who I've been in a social network with for a while. And one of the things that I'm seeing that the publications, you know, that are coming out from them and like their YouTube channels and stuff, they're like living in the past. They're like just thinking about the glory of Black communism, right? Like just the glory of like the Black left and just all of the, you know, Gerald Horne's work. And I'm all about Sankofa. I'm all about, let's go back, but don't get stuck there. If you're going to talk about the past, link it to what the fuck is happening now and what these people have planned, because how else are you helping the community if all you're doing is waxing poetic about Black communism in the days past? Right. Connect it to what's happening now.
Well, and see, that's what I'm still trying to struggle with on the left is like the technology, because as far as I can tell, like part of, I think, the reckoning that has to happen is to acknowledge, to try to restore, to work towards restoring right relationship among people and to the environment, and not just, it's not an anthropocentric view, it is a view of all the beings that we share this finite planet with, right? And so if we're trying to figure out what the future looks like in a non-anthropocentric way, in a way that acknowledges the finite carrying capacity of this planet, in a way that isn't subject to globalized technology, we have to figure out what is the role of technology in this future. And I think in a way that respects, you know, carbon life versus silicon life, right? And like, are we building blockchain communism? You know, what are the automated luxury communism? That stupid, you know, thing that, you know, what does that mean for Bolivia or the kids in Congo or, you know, the data centers? Until we actually have developed a technology that doesn't harm vulnerable people to get the infrastructure to build it and to power it, we really should be thoughtful about that. And do we want a virtualized, globalized world? Is the goal of certain people on the left to live in a video game? I mean, maybe it is, but if that's the choice that they want to make, then they should respect that there are people who don't want that choice, and to not ruin the whole world with nanotechnology and get it in the water cycle. And, you know, without us being active participants to say that that's not what we want.
I think that's what it has to be about, especially as all of this stuff is like rolling out now. Like, where is the Socratic questioning? Where are the people, particularly people from historically marginalized communities? Where is the questioning? Like, where are the groups that are pushing back? And it seems like most of the people, and I do think that it's different this time because we are in a public, you know, there's a public health emergency and everything. And so I think that's very strategic, like for the social impact investors to exploit a situation like this and exploit people's fears of a health, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think I'm actually going to have her on. I would love to have you both on at the same time, because I think you could ask her some really direct questions that I wouldn't know how to ask her. But Harriet Washington, who was the author of Medical Apartheid, she released a book in February, said the eroding informed consent happening in the United States. Wow. And as you know, she is at Harvard. And so she's talking about and I have to pick up the book and get to reading it, but I'm going to interview her on this chapter. And I want to ask her, like, just pointedly, like, do you see that happening now in this public health emergency? Do you see people's informed consent being eroded right now?
Right. Yeah, no, it's, you know, and because for this, you know, I came in through the education space and the poverty space, and really it's been a big trajectory this past year to dive into the health analytics space. But the more I've come up against, you know, digging in, the more I start to question the ways in which the medical research structure and the interface of public money and private, you know, investment in sort of these big moonshot research programs, in the Brain Project, right? And in the cancer genomic space. What is, how it's a lot of this, Giordano talks about dual use. You know, there's like the ostensible primary use, but then it gets spun off into other uses. And, I went and I did like a little ritual intention at Wharton Business School a few weeks ago. There was a woman who's organizing mothers. I keep calling for a global peace movement against the AI coup of the world. And so I'm like, she said, could you be part of this? And I said, well, I'm going to do a little ritual. I'm going to go to Wharton. And so it's like they want to push us in this video game. And I went down to the game cabinet in our basement, and I got this mousetrap game. It never worked really well like it did when we were kids, but I pulled out that, and I had these little, doll, and I just did a revocation of consent. I said, we're not going to be in your game. We're not going to do this. And it was at the Huntsman building, and the Huntsman family, again, they're Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from Utah, very powerful family connected with, sort of the State Department. The younger one was the governor of Utah and had ties to Penn, and they made their money in chemicals. They made their fortune in chemicals. And then, in fact, their first big money maker was in styrofoam in the clamshell containers for fast food. Okay. So if you understand what that looks like, then they used their philanthropic resources to endow genomic cancer research. Okay, so they've got the chemicals, then they're endowing the cancer research, which is really genomic, and now those outcomes leverage into development of biotech, potentially towards like this transhumanistic cybernetic program. And so we have, as we consider public health issues and we consider this research and development, we know that they have been poisoning communities, right? We know these industries have been intentionally poisoning communities, especially
Hell they have. Monsanto, all of these. Yeah, yes. Hell yeah, they have.
Like environmental racism is a thing, and then they'll sell you the cure, right? And then
they create the thing and then sell you the cure. That's bullshit.
They'll sell you the thing that'll make you into a cyborg preemptively, right? And so I just feel like people are being processed in ways that both control and extract profit, and that is foundational to the Black body, like to the history of this country and how Black people were managed as a valuable asset in coercive and predatory ways. And that now, in the name of these new systems of technology and safety and equity, that it's happening again, but people are unable to, they don't know the language. They've been bewitched. They've been bewitched by a narrative that is not, in my opinion, in the best interest of most people.
No, and I think, just in general, we used to question billionaires. I've been shocked. I'm serious. I have been shocked by the amount of people, and I guess I shouldn't be, but I've been shocked by the amount of people who have really latched on to the UBI. And one of the things that I just have as foundational is like, if there's a bunch of billionaires supporting this, we should at least question it. At least question it.
People are not understanding the spatial web and blockchain. I mean, to me,
I know we talked about this, but can you like break down? You usually are here with your pretty slides and maps. Can you break down what the spatial web is? Because people are probably hearing that and like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, so what is it? The spatial web? Like, if you could dig into that a little bit.
Well, so, I'm not a video gamer. But I think that, like, when I remember way back in the day, in the early 90s, like, you could click on things in a game and, like, there would be information about them, right? Or, like, you could interact with them in different ways. And I don't know, I'm sure it's much more sophisticated now. But
it sounds like Black Mirror. There was an episode on Black Mirror where this Black guy was like, you could have sex with people, like, in your virtual.
I do remember that one.
You remember that episode?
Yeah. And so So there's two things going on. On the one hand, they want to virtualize us as an avatar, as a digital cartoon, like digitize us, digitize our physical aspect and our behaviors. Actually, a lot of the data collection is going to go on, I think, through digital twinning tied to health analytics. They want to virtualize us as a character and push us into a video game. Like, that's the one way it's happening. The other way is that they want to layer the real world as a video game. And that's what we had mentioned the last time about Pokemon Go. The idea that you would, through a device, there would be layers added onto your reality, right? There would be the little creatures that you capture, for this game. But that was the test balloon. And Niantic, that developed Pokemon Go, they got their funding from In-Q-Tel, which is the venture capital arm of the CIA. And most people don't really think of Pokemon Go as like, oh, that's like the CIA trialing out like augmented reality in the spatial web. They don't think about it like that. And in fact, the Knight Foundation and Niantic are working together on playful augmented cities, right?
Knight Foundation, is that in Minneapolis as well?
I'm trying to remember. It was newspapers. It was they're focused in where the Knight company had their newspapers, and they're active in Philadelphia. They're active in San Jose. They're KNIGHT Foundation. They gave the city of Philadelphia an Internet of Things grant. They've been doing smart technology with San Jose, and they frame it as fun, right? Like they frame it as like, oh, look here, let's do a virtual tour of, historic Black Atlanta, and we'll have all of, like, look, now they're even talking, you're seeing the AI simulations of historical characters, right? And, you can sit and talk to this person. It's almost like they're exactly right with you, right? And so they're going to pick the use case that is very acceptable, right? But if you divorce that from the power structure, if you divorce that from saying like, oh, this is Niantic, it's connected to Gilman Louis, who came out of Hasbro, who's like getting fed money by the CIA, that is doing like, human computer simulations. And these simulations are feeding financial markets and military markets, military strategy. Maybe this isn't so fun, right? And where does this go if many academics have made a lot of money writing books about racism and data, right? There are many people out there right now writing books. I know Rua Benjamin has come out and, like in Japan, right? And I tried to talk to her and we haven't gotten very far, but I'm like, imagine we already know this, but you've embedded it into the whole world and then connected us digitally as like a surveillance tracking device with contracting arrangements on how we're allowed to interface with the real world. Don't tell me that's not going to be racialized, because we've already said that the data isn't in and of itself racialized, like it's layered on racist data collection. You're not going to layer that on the real world and expect people to interact with it and have it not be racist. It's just it's further digitizing structural racism into the landscape, into the physical landscape, in my opinion. I mean, I don't like, I'm happy to have other academic people unpack that, but I don't see, knowing all the research that has already been done around the way in which data analytics are weaponized against Black and brown communities, that making it more sophisticated and putting, augmented reality contact lenses and trackers on people is going to make it less racist.
Have you been able to get anywhere with the Data for Black Lives group? Remember, I told you that I was familiar with them and that I went to all of their conferences have been held at MIT.
That's the War Machine. I mean, they do the digital currency initiative. They've got Enigma protocol that's the back door to the digital identity. So, I guess there's two camps. Maybe there's still a group of people who do believe if they just had the right combination of data, that racism would be addressed.
There are people that believe that. I will tell you that. Like, I know people who feel like they can make the data and take the data and prove racism is bad and this is what we need to do to change.
But that's assuming that these people have a conscience, right? I mean, should we believe that the U.S. war machine has a conscience? I mean,
they certainly, and I would say people who, want to talk about the conspiracy theorist bullshit is like, history is our best teacher. Has America's war machine ever, right, had a conscience? And the question to that is, if you're knowledgeable, is no.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is I think individuals have a conscience. I think, and for me, because we are all in this machine, like I'm talking about I'm not saying I'm outside of this machine. Like,
I'm definitely into it. I'm all in it. Yeah.
I'm not saying, no one is allowed to say anything unless they're perfectly clean on this, because none of us are. We're all in it, right?
Sure, yeah.
But how do we pull individuals of conscience so that we can slow down this machine, interrogate the motivations of this machine? If we think of it as a structural operation that has a historic continuum into which we have been born, to me, that gives us more flexibility, at least I think, from the white side to enter into the conversation and try to start pulling it apart, as opposed to simply just saying, I disengage totally. And I think what would be the biggest thread, I mean, as Dr. King, knew, is to unify people around this common ground, which, my current analysis is that artificial intelligence is the end game settler colonizer. AI
Say
is
that again. Artificial, and I want people to quote this. Artificial intelligence is the end game
settler colonizer.
Settler colonizer.
Right. And so the difference between colonization and settler colonialism is that in colonization, the people arrive, they dominate the existing population, and they take the resources, and then they make the existing population submit to their will and work for them or whatever. So that's but the settler element means they actually want to eliminate the original inhabitants, period. And that's through genocide, that's through extermination, and that's through cultural erasure. So the settler piece is to actually full on take those individuals out of the equation. And then if you understand that AI as the settler colonizer, humanity is the point of erasure. Natural life, not just humans, because again, I'm trying not to be anthropocentric, but natural life on Earth becomes the target of the settler colonizer. To me, that is a unifying message. Especially for parents, you know what I mean? Like, for people who care about animals, for people who care about the environment, that is a unifying message. And I'm saying not to set aside the history, to know that if you understand it as a settler colonizer, that means that you acknowledge that that is a machine that exists. And then to me, coming at that, I mentioned in a couple other talks, Mark Benioff of Salesforce. Salesforce is one of these data dashboards, and he was a protege of Larry Ellison. And Ellison of Oracle, they were aiming to have the ultimate database to track everything. And
wow,
in 2002, there's a New York Times article, and it closed with the journalist saying, like, is there going to be one big database? And the guy's like, Larry Ellison says, yes, like in 20 years, will there be the database? And he says, yes, and it'll be Oracle, and we will track everything. And that was 2002. Wow. So 20 years is next year, okay? And then Ellison told Benioff, he said, read The Art of War. And Benioff is saying, I want our competitors to come out at us with intense aggression. Like I found
the article. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's a really important article, actually. There's lots of
a single national security database. That's what it says.
Yeah.
Let me put it here. Please keep talking.
And so, like,
so next year is the year.
Is and wanting to antagonize his competitors to be aggressive. That if we can come at this in a deeply grounded spiritual place of peace and righteousness, of restoring a right relationship to one another and acknowledging that has been torn, and both based in racial capitalism and based how we treat the natural world. That is powerful stuff, because I do believe in my heart that there is something that is happening beyond what we can physically see with our immediate senses, as that there are energetic systems, that these people know how to manipulate energetic systems beyond what we commonly understand. And so if you're coming at it from a powerful place of righteousness and whatever your faith, whatever your spirit, that there's something bigger than us, and in solidarity we can face off this AI. To me, that is sort of my framing. So,
yeah, that's actually a really good way to kind of synthesize what we've been talking about. In terms of, because I always get this question sometimes, in the comments, in terms of ways to kind of push back on this stuff, right? What are some ideas that you've been talking about, like with other people, maybe other podcasters? Because you get around, like you're always on somebody's platform these days, right?
I'm sure they're the Jeremiah.
Yeah. And I'm sure their listeners like get the same question, like, well, how do we push back? Like, how do we like stop, or, like you say, put the wrench in the gears of this moving machine? Like, we may not be able to stop all of it, but like, how do we at least make it more difficult to be just implemented? And I'm really shocked that the UTLA signed up for that common pass without any question.
I mean, it's the fear. And I have to say, like in Philadelphia, I do believe that we are part of a trauma-based mind operation, that this is very sophisticated, a military mind program like that. And so I don't know why it's hit some people more than others, but fear is a very big threat, right? And a promise of safety. And again, who would believe that in the heart of empire, anybody's going to be guaranteed safety, right? I mean, that to me, that feels like.
And who would believe the safety would come from corporations?
Right. Microsoft, they just care about you and your DNA. But so I would say, like, it's sort of a process. I don't have a guidebook on this. And to me, sure. I kind of like, I feel like if there is a bigger force out there, like for us, like we were put in each other's paths. I think things happen for a reason. So you walk, like I was trained and, you have the plan, jump through the hoop, and you perform the good behaviors. And to me, I've kind of thrown that out the window, and I just try to listen to my heart and be open to the next thing and doing the right thing in this space. I think there are models that can be done. I think being willing to do the internal work to understand what is the true threat, the nature of the threat, the historic nature, and how it currently presents, so that you can talk to others about it. And I'm not perfect. Like my family doesn't still get me really, but
sure.
You can't convince anyone of a certain thing. You can just put your intention out. So you keep putting your intention out. People who can hear it will find it. I think asking people about, asking the school districts to get the testing, and Michael Kane with Teachers for Choice, he has a lot of good information about how they went about that, and they were supported by a number of different law firms. So I think there are models there about getting the contracts. If you're, even if you're not sending your kids into the schools, as people who are taxpayers, you have a right to know who's making money on the testing, where's the data going, where are these samples going, right? I would say, there are a lot of people who are doing work around, mutual aid, mutualism.
Lots of people I know doing that work.
Right. And so I think it's two trajectories. Like on the one hand, I think you don't want to just, to me, I feel like just running, like creating your own space, while it's good, ultimately, if you become a threat and they've got their directed energy weapons and their nanotech that they'll drop from the drones, like you need both sides. You need people contesting the narrative all the way down, and then you need people modeling how to be independent of the system. So those two tracks, if you can find a place to plug into those. And, I think some faith practice, like for me, I'm coming at this, I was never a particularly faithy person, but it feels like connecting with that larger energy system is really important. And using your skills, like Robin Wall Kimmerer, she's someone I love. Like I would say, if you're feeling a little hopeless, she's a citizen Potawatomi Nation. She's an indigenous biologist who teaches in this New York university system. And she has a beautiful, sort of an anti-capitalist reflection on people's relation to nature. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass. But, she talks about, we have to know our gifts and how to give them, right? So we've been placed in this time. If we can see that there is this work to be done, we step up and do the work. And I think we have to realize it's a long haul, and we have to maybe redefine what success looks like. And we have to try to live according to our values as best we can, knowing that different people, especially Black and brown people, are in different positions of being able to engage and contest the system. Like I understand that, and that's why I'm trying to do this work from my position. But just try to be a good person, to be kind to yourself and your family and your community, and question, and then assert, counter the narrative. People are bewitched. I think people have been captured. Ulysses talks about this framework of sight, capture, inject, trace, erase. But before the capture, there's this enchantment. And so be kind. There are a lot of people, it's very tempting to be angry at the people who you feel you can't get through to. But I think if we can come at this from a place of welcome back in, we should never let people walk out and never be able to come back into the circle. Like we have to be able to keep the circle growing.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's actually really good. I just found her book, and it's called Braiding Sweet Grass. And try to see if I can put a link to it here for the people. Her name is Robin Kimmerer.
Yeah, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she actually has a lot of talks if you don't feel like getting the book. She has a lovely voice. And she's, when we're talking about science, right?
Yeah.
There's not one monolithic science, and indigenous approaches to science and the natural world are really important as a counterbalance to this absolutism. There are other ways of looking at the world scientifically that are that enrich our understanding of the world. And she's a pretty amazing person. Her specialty is actually moss.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she understands at this very tiny level. I've emailed her about like the nanotech and the water cycle, which really worries me. So
that's something else. I'm so glad you brought that up. Before we close, I do want to talk a little bit about that, because I listened to your interview the other day while I was driving, and I forget the host's name. She's it was a woman, and I believe South Asian woman. I'm not sure what her nationality was, but
Yugita, maybe mystery.
I think so. Yeah. You had to post it on another because YouTube pulled it down.
Oh, no. That was Ramola D. That was the more recent one. Yeah.
That's the one literally just last week. I listened to it while I was driving back from DC, because it's always like a 30 or 40-minute drive. And she was talking about nanotech in the water and all this shit. And I said, what? So I wanted to ask you about that. First of all, what the hell is nanotechnology? I'm sure people listening are probably like, I've never heard of that shit. What is it? And how are they putting it in the water? And why don't people know it's in the water?
Well, so nanotechnology has been in development for the past 20 or so years. And it's, I don't know how to quantify, but it's this tiny, tiny scale, like subatomic scale. And these particulates can actually be engineered. And I don't even know what kind of equipment you use to engineer this stuff. But at that tiny scale, the normal laws of physics do not apply. So a lot of times they actually talk about like carbon nanotubes are sort of a central element. And it's almost like they're building little robots with these tiny subatomic particles. And the nanorobotics are actually framed as like cellular therapeutics, like getting into your cells, but in other, not just human cells, in other uses. They're talking about using it in soil, using it for water purification.
In food?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of nano in sunblock, which is interesting because how much have we heard the past 5 years or so? Like everybody slather on the sunblock, and I'm like, and then I started early on when there were such bad health outcomes happening in New York City, and I was trying to figure out. People were saying, is it environmental? Both on the Navajo Nation and in Queens, like in the Bronx, what's going on? Is it, I'm thinking, is this DNA, targeting? Or maybe it's environmental because the hospital in Queens was near the airport. And so I started looking into biofuels, and biofuels have nanotechnology. And I'm like,
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know it. Who knew? You don't know until you know. And they're like, oh, by the way, there's a lot of nanotech in sunblock. I'm like, look, nobody's telling us these things.
It's not nobody tells us, right?
Right. And so there's these tiny particles. They're talking about using it in geoengineering now, like the whole understanding of like. They try to frame it as conspiracy theory of chemtrails. Now they're right out. Bill Gates and Harvard are saying, well, we need to geoengineer the planet so that we don't, for climate change and to keep us cool.
Yeah.
Now they're just saying it as geoengineering, but it's been coming for a long time as like aerosolized particles. But there is a national nanotechnology initiative is embedded in quite a few research university systems. And Penn, University of Pennsylvania, has a nanotech institute. And we were just given a $25 million grant, I think, from the NSF, the Penn Engineering, to work on precision agriculture, so nanotechnology in the soils. But they have like a national conference annually, and water purification is a huge part of it. So I'm like, okay, so you're saying that you have these particles, they work in ways that are counter to our currently understood laws of physics at the nano level, and you're going to start throwing them around in the environment. And I would encourage people, if they haven't seen the movie Dark Waters, which is a Mark Ruffalo film that is about DuPont and Teflon poisoning the town of Parkersburg, West Virginia. It's a really good, and I empathize with him because he was actually a guy who was like a lawyer who was trained to represent chemical companies, and he got pulled into this battle because his grandmother was from Parkersburg, and this guy, all his cattle were dying, and they were poisoned by these drums that were, toxins from the Teflon production that poisoned this whole town and all the world really with Teflon. So they're acting with impunity. So if we know that years ago DuPont for 20 or 30 years was poisoning people all over the world with these chemicals, now folks have got nanotech. We need to learn some of these lessons out of history and question.
I've never heard of Dark Water, but I think I'm gonna try to convince my husband to watch it with me today. Is it like a documentary?
Legal, he's nobody sues DuPont. Like that's what they say. Nobody, and that's right near Philly. Wilmington. They're right out in Delaware, right near us, and there's a scene in which he does discovery. He's doing discovery on them, files for the paperwork. And you can see DuPont going on discovery. You want discovery. And they sent like 3 semi-trailers to his law office. So there's a picture of him like surrounded by, towers of cardboard files. And it's sort of like, I dare you to find it. I dare you to find the smoking gun in here.
Wow.
And it almost ruined his family. Like he's a very devout Catholic, but he did it, it's still kind of a blip because it certainly didn't turn the whole tide, but he took a very principled stand at a great cost. And now what we're dealing with is much greater.
I see my friend Mary Sue. I'm so glad she is watching this because she is a person that I've worked with directly, and I know she cares a lot about the stuff that we're talking about. And the fact that this happened in West Virginia, which is, as we know, is not a whole lot of Black folks there. There are Black folks. There's not a whole lot. This is likely happening to poor white people, that these corporations don't give a fuck about nobody.
Nope, they don't.
You know what I'm saying?
What's so sad is that it was the employer of this town, right? And the stuff, like the kids' teeth were rotting out black because it these carbons, it's these carbon chains. And people are getting terrible cancers. And so he actually, part of it was that he got the legal process to track people over time voluntarily. This is not like what we're talking about, the long-term effects, because it says you might not know the effects of this until like 10 years down the line. And so they set up a place where people could be tested again voluntarily. But everyone like on this bus, they're like, they wouldn't do this to us. Like they're, that's a good company because they put their kids through college. They're like, I had a good corporate job and I put my kid through college on this job, right? They wouldn't poison us. And they totally poison those people, and all of us, so.
When you start to like really peel back the layers, I don't see how anybody can like say this is some crazy, wild conspiracy when you know history.
They don't want us to know the history. They don't want it. They don't want anyone to connect.
They don't want anybody to connect the history. I'm glad that people are at least connecting Johnson & Johnson. I was really surprised. There were people like, wink, oh, is this the same Johnson & Johnson company that wants to give us a COVID vaccine? The one that killed babies with baby powder and shit, it's nuts.
And then people should have an informed choice.
Informed, right. We should be informed. And I feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I wanted to ask you about this because I'm like, this stuff is being passed under our noses. Like there are bills that are being passed in state legislatures all across this country to enable the tech to really take over. Like they have to go through like the political systems. And most of our left organizations aren't trained to like watch out for technology. We're trained to look for police reform, what's happening with schools, and there's these organizations don't usually have the capacity, and so it's like we need to probably be listening to all of it, right? Like to see what's really happening. But it's like the regular everyday people don't have the language and to know that we should be questioning nanotechnology, water purification. How do we know that we should be questioning that if they make it sound like it's so wonderful?
Right. Well, they don't. I mean, and I mean, the thing is, like, I felt like, I mean, not everybody can know all the things, but I'm thinking they've been working on this for 20 years, and I pay pretty, I'm not steeped in the environmental movement, but I care about it, and I would, I was following Standing Rock and following the pipeline protests, and I'm thinking, yeah, the pipeline protests, but what happens if it's in the whole atmosphere, right? Like, so it doesn't seem to link out. And I'm like, do they not know? Like, it feels like so much of it is captured. Like, the movements are captured. And you're not allowed to question, and you're not allowed to know. And that's why this Twitter conversation with this supposed hate group yesterday, like putting out hit lists on individuals, like, I mean, Twitter, like trying to get them banned off of social media. It's like,
was this the left group that did it?
Scare? Like, do you not know how McCarthyism turned out? Like, do you really? We should be lifting up people to actively question and be critical thinkers, as opposed to shutting down conversation and saying that
That's exactly what social media is doing.
We'll decide for you what the truth is. This memory hole, and this moment of editing. You can just edit things away. Deplatform, and the history matters. And that's why I'm really grateful to be able to have the conversation with you and, the folks that follow your page, because the more that we can have active voices in this part of the conversation, interpreting it in ways that are really about affecting people's direct, immediate lives and providing a counter narrative, because that's what I told Kevin on Friday when we were talking about Daily Pass. I do believe most people want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think that there is a small group of tyrants or sociopaths or whatever but most people want to get out of bed in the morning and feel like they're a decent human being.
That's right.
And the system is set up so that to make that very hard, and harder for some people than others. And by participating in the behavior, the condoned behaviors around what has happened over the past year, makes people feel like they're doing the right thing. Because if they're told this is what it means to be good, you check these boxes and do these behaviors, that reinforces their sense that they want to be the right thing. And if we can provide a counter narrative to transition them to say, you can be good in another way, and this is the more nuanced conversation. This is the conversation in context of understanding a larger history. To be able to walk away from the checkbox behaviors that you're being fed into something else doesn't mean you're a bad person, that you wear these labels that they would like you to wear. Right. That there is another way. And that's,
unfortunately,
I don't do it perfectly, but that's what I'm trying to do. And people, like, for the most part, they don't try to tear me down, because I am simply telling the truth as I understand it and asking people to think and engage.
Right. I said this to someone maybe a couple weeks ago. I said, think it's still legal. Think, damn, you know what I mean? Critically think, question, you know what I mean? But it's like they're making people like me and you who are questioners and people who are thinkers, they're like creating, like they want to put everybody in the box with right-wing people. And anybody who knows me, like Mary Sue and other folks who you see commenting here, people who know me know I'm as far away as you can get from a right-wing person or a right-wing, whatever you think the right wing is. Like, that's not me. I want liberation, and I center Black people. They know I center poor and working class Black people in everything that I do. The last time I checked, that isn't very right-wing.
I know. And the thing is, and I've gone into spaces where people are inadvertently building this machine, refining this machine, right? And they're predominantly white spaces, right? And this machine is eating everything. And if I can come in and say, look at this history, like, for the most part, these are not people who are in denial about what happened about enslavement. They're not in denial about this. If you tell them in a place of like a generosity, like, this is our shared history and it's not great. It needs to be fixed. And guess what? Now we all need to fix it, because this is AI, the settler colonizer. We're here. Right. We're here. There's no in that New York Times article with Larry Ellison. He's touring Oracle, and they're actually even talking about the aftermath of 9/11 being so good for Oracle's business model. and that they're going to start having these passports to get on airplanes tied to your behaviors. And he's having lunch with the Oracle
activists
staff.
Activists like me are never going to be able to fly anywhere. Rabble rousers, no, people who are fighters and all of that, like, we're going to be pigeonholed and labeled as domestic terrorists. Like, do you see that's what happened? Like, the FBI has already called people like me Black identity extremists. Did you see that? The FBI has like the FBI has this like list like that we are like, what the fuck is a Black identity extremist?
It's a threat to the empire. It's not like, it's about labeling. It's about the control.
It's all about labeling. Exactly.
It's labels and it's the narrative. And, but in this, you know, they're talking about if you can't get on a plane because you didn't pay your parking ticket or you didn't show up for jury duty, like, is that where it's going to go? Right? This isn't 2002. This isn't 2002. This isn't the New York Times article. So at Oracle, the journalist.
I posted the article. It's in the comments. Where we're going? You can go back and see it.
And he said, all of this is, you know, senior staff at Oracle, and they're having boxed lunch or whatever. And he's like, everybody just stared at their sandwiches. Wow. He's like, who gets to decide who gets on the plane? 2002. And he said, these are people probably, you know, at the time with nice 6-figure salaries and advanced degrees and, you know, whatever. And they stared at their sandwiches because they're paid to stare at their sandwiches. And I've said this in a couple of interviews, but like, people who are in this managerial class, we have to look up from the sandwiches because there's no ducking away from this thing. Like, unless you own your own island with no 5G, you're not getting out of this. And you're going to lose your soul if you try to fit yourself into this machine, I think.
That's, you know what this reminds me of? I think I've shared with you before that I am a student of Dr. Amos Wilson. He was a Black sociologist, a Black thinker, a very foremost Black thinker in our community. And he transitioned from a brain aneurysm in 1994. But he has written several books, and there's still lots of his YouTube videos or lots of his videos back then. YouTube wasn't a thing in 94, right? but his videos of him talking to the Black community, he said that the people who will destroy the world would not be the people that you have been socialized to be afraid of. It will be people with PhDs. Yeah. He said that in the early 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said that. And I tell my husband all the time, I said, that man was a fucking prophet. He predicted all this stuff that's happening in China right now and what we've seen happen over the last couple of years. He's predicted, like, this was back in the 90s, Alison.
I mean, I think that there are people who have been sent for us to lean on. I mean, I do. I mean, the ancestors, all of, like, they're, you know, I'm still figuring all this stuff out. Like, and some of this is like beyond, like, I waded in, I follow LinkedIn profiles and watch the videos and read the white papers, but there's something big that you can't just find on the internet in, you know, a 990 form or that sort of thing. There's something bigger. And, you know, when I was in the trenches, you know, fighting with the school districts about the school privatization stuff, and there was a woman, her name is Mama Gail, and she fought really hard. She's continually fighting to surface Black history in Philadelphia and to bring representation. And she would come in and she would just, you know, that 3-minute limit on the testimony, she just blow through that, right? And she was, you know, she was like, I'm here for the ancestors. Like, I'm here because this is, and so we're, you know, we walk this road that was made by others, and then we just got to walk it as long as with the time we've got, right? And try to be open to learning new things and trying to stay human and to realize that we're fallible and we're going to mess up, but to try to still make things right when we mess up and keep going, you know, because I think we have to model that for our kids.
Yeah, we have to. Alison, as always, it's so great to always have you here on this platform. We always get a lot of like engagement in the comments, and, you know, like more people are like starting to like really start to pay attention. And I've seen people, you know, from my organizing days in Ohio, back in Dayton. And these are all people that I know that genuinely care about humanity. and would want to know like this kind of information, and it's like it is for me, knowing you and like being in like this relationship with you has like pulled the wool over my eyes almost. Like, I mean, like the language I'm starting to see more
it's like
prevalent.
learning a language. It really
It
is.
is.
Helps you.
It is, and I'm starting to see it like more and more, and it's like really getting to be embedded. Like I didn't even know about what happened with LA, and as they say, is like LA goes, like so goes the rest of the country. LA was also the first school district to announce that they were going to be all fully online, and I remember even back then, my intuition told me that's wrong. And I went against people who are on the left and who are like so like, but you got to support the teachers union. And I'm like, not when it's against the fucking best interest of poor working class Black folks. I said they did this shit without even asking Black people. They did this shit without even asking poor and working class people. And I said they're going to criminalize Black parents who have to leave their children at home. And if their kids don't get on fucking virtual learning, they're going to criminalize. And guess what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly.
You see the story out of the Black woman in Ohio. Her name is Shayna Bell. And I tell people all the time, say her name. Her story was just a blip and nobody wants to talk about it anymore. Here she is as a Black working class mom. They arrested her working at a damn pizza joint because she didn't have childcare, and her 13-year-old wasn't in school. Well, the fucking schools are closed.
Wow.
Nobody talked to parents like her.
No. I mean, and that is the thing. That is what is coming with. I mean, and it's very hard to say, but the shift, the language around we want cops out of the schools and we want social workers in the schools is that, you know, I'm not about over policing schools, and I understand the school to prison pipeline, but if the social workers are put in schools under these conditions with pay for success finance, with telehealth, with medicalizing kids, with pushing pay for success services on families, and potentially using their kids as a weapon against them, that's going to be a huge problem. And it's going to be a problem for the people who are the social workers, because I don't think anybody gets out of the bed in the morning wanting to do that. But that's the system that we're walking into. So if we are going to start to try to support families in schools, we got to get pay for success finance out of that Every Student Succeeds Act. We got to shut that down, and we got to fix the loopholes in FERPA so that the kids' data privacy is actually private and that they're not being set up as a commodity. We have, but we shouldn't be using people's misery as a profit center. And that is fundamentally what is going to be happening. And it's interesting because that daily pass is feeding information both to not only Microsoft and Anthem, but to Johns Hopkins. Okay.
Get the fuck out of here. So the daily pass in LA schools
and Stanford and HealthNet, another company, and UCLA. And it turns out I was looking into UCLA, and Lawrence Fink, who's the head of BlackRock, I believe the CEO of BlackRock, he got his MBA at UCLA Business School. And Greg Morrow, who's the ed tech venture capitalist, got his MBA at UCLA Business School. So you got to look at the whole web. You know, you've got a superintendent there whose background is in, politics and global finance.
Why would they hire a superintendent whose background is in politics and global finance?
Because the kids
I have to connect you to Eric Mann. So one thing about me is, and I just realized this, I think in the last year or so, but I have a very deep network. And Eric Mann, who's a Jewish a friend of mine, he runs an organization, he's a former communist, or like he's an older white guy, white Jewish guy, but he organized like back in the day, like back in the like 60s with like Black folks in LA, and was connected to a lot of Black communists. But he's still like doing the work in LA. And I would love for him to talk to you, because I think that he has a platform as well. In fact, he's on the, whatever the Pacifica public radio is.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to try to do that over email, but I feel like him, and the reason why I thought about him is because he's in LA, and he's fought like the LA school district, because LA also had tanks. The LA had a school police department that participated in the United States 1033 program. And it was his organization that fought. Yeah, the school police had tanks from the military. And it was his organization that fought and got LA School District not only to get rid of the tanks, but they apologized to the Black community. He centers Black people. And if you look him up, his organization is called the Labor and Community Strategy Center. He has been around for years. Some people don't like him because he's, very like just gung-ho about like what he believes and what he wants to do. But I feel like, how did Eric let a superintendent like that get over LA schools? Like, did they organize against that? So when you told me that LA superintendent's background, it may triggered me to think about Eric, and like, he would be all over that kind of shit usually.
Well, I mean, they push this stuff. I mean, that's what I was saying to Kevin last night. I mean, the Philadelphia public schools, we didn't have control over our school board for years. And then when we finally did, it's really the mayor's puppets. And, it's very hard to figure out how to make these institutions accountable. Like but at this point, somebody needs to make sure that kids are not put on blockchain. That's the bottom line. Like, that's the line in the sand for me at this point, is we need an abolition movement against blockchain identity. And we need for the people who are advancing Bitcoin to understand that it really is about tracking individuals as hunted, really game characters in an augmented reality police state. I mean, that's what's coming. Blockchain is going to underpin that, and they're going to frame it to you as liberation, and you get to build your own brand, and you have your data, but ultimately is about turning you into a digital wallet and putting you in a video game run by the military for hedge funds. And we got to make sure
run by the military, but for hedge funds.
Well, yeah, this is all military technology.
So I know BlackRock is a hedge fund. Like, how do we get a list of all these hedge funds that are based in the United States? But it's global though, right?
You could be invested in by any of them, right? So like Paul Tudor Jones, he was the one behind Harlem Children's Zone stuff. Marshall Wace, Goldman Sachs. It's these industrial banking companies. And a lot of them are headquartered in Utah. These industrial banking companies who are doing innovative financial products. And a lot of them are going to run.
Innovation is the thing that they use to get people excited about it. They're disruptive. That's what ARK Invest, ARK Invest also.
And the interesting thing about ARK is that actually one of the big entities in the United Kingdom that's connected to the academies, which is like the equivalent of charter schools there, it's called Absolute Return for Kids. And the guy who set up Absolute Return for Kids, I'm trying to remember his name. He was a French financier, Busson, Arpad Busson, I think. And so in 2010, I have a slide that he would hold these fundraisers. And in 2010, he had a fundraiser where 800 of the world's largest hedge funds and bankers came to his fundraiser. In 2010. What does the world of 800 hedge fund managers look like?
This is connected to Duke Sanford. This was in 29 Harvard Business School. Absolute Return for Kids is a charity with strong financial support. Wow.
And the thing is, the other thing about Absolute Return for Kids is that they were doing fast track social work certification. So it was like Teach for America, but for social workers, and embedding them in the schools in the UK.
So this is about schools in the UK. They got Black kids all over their website. I'm getting ready to put it.
It's the same playbook.
Yeah, let me put this in the chat for people so that like people have these.
Yeah, Arpad Busson is not a good guy. And actually, if you go to Little Sis, I've done a lot of work on that. People can pull it up. I've done some maps tied to the UK because this is a global program, and that I think that's the silver lining of this global health situation, is that people who would not normally have connected around the world are connecting. And so we're able, in this cloud-based world, these pilot programs happen in one part of the world, bits and pieces. They sort of break up the agenda into different pilots so that they can compile them together later. But we're finding each other.
Wow, I'm just on their website, and it's just like,
it's deep.
I put the link in the chat, but yeah, they're all over UK schools. So you said this is UK's version of like the Harlem Children's Zone?
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it's connected with Marshall Wace, hedge fund.
Marshall Wace hedge fund? I'm just Googling it.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. So Marshall, like M-A-R.
Or SHALL, waste, WACE, I think.
WACE.
It's been a bit. I have my slides to lean on.
Yeah. Okay. Here it is. Marshall Wace is a global alternative asset management company with a philosophy of entrepreneurship and a history of innovation. That's it.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I keep thinking about, is that as they are selling everyone on digital entrepreneurship, and and this is a conversation I have with like the libertarian side of things, is like, do you know the thing you're going to be investing in is people turned into digital cartoon character commodities? Because we're not building stuff anymore. Like, we're really the only.
We're not building stuff, right? Everything is like going to be in the cloud.
Yeah, we're going to be virtual if we allow it, and that's what I'm saying, is that I think we need to fight for our basic rights as natural beings to live in the real world, but we do have to restore a balance and a right relationship in that world. We have to be grounded in the real, but understand that the work has to be done to live in a better relationship in the world with each other and the environment.
Thank you, Alison, as always, for all of your research, for all of the connections and the maps. People can reach Alison at wrenchingthegears.com. That is her website, her blog. And there's so much information there, way more than we can fit in, like on this video. And we can never manage to keep our videos less than 2 hours.
I know, right?
It's always
I have a YouTube channel. I think if you just look at Alison McDowell, like there's a whole playlist of other interviews. So like this will be on that, but there's like 40 interviews at this point. So like if you want an immersion class in, dystopia,
absolutely,
you can
jump in. Alison McDowell on YouTube. You definitely, absolutely should go to her YouTube page, because I live there, and I've listened already. It is creepy to like live out in videos. No, I told you, Alison, you thought I was kidding. When my husband and I traveled to Ohio back during the holiday season in December, we listened to your videos all the way there and all the way back. So I had listened to all of your videos that you had up there to date, literally had listened to all of them.
Wow.
And like, my husband was making connections, and he was just like, yeah, like some of this stuff, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had warned about as well. And he was like making his own connections and stuff. And we both like kind of looked at each other like, how do we protect our kids, I
think we have to call it out for what it is. Like, it's the civil rights of our time, but it is for all of natural life. And the thing is, it's up for human beings to stand up for like every other thing, because humans are building this. Humans are building a thing that might eliminate natural life on the planet with synthetic biology. And talk about informed consent. I mean, how does a microorganism consent to this thing? How does a tree consent? Like, we're treading on some really end times.
I've already actually saw videos in Singapore. Singapore is actually one of the places where they're piloting the smart cities. And you're so right. They're doing the trees. There's like cameras on trees. It's everywhere. Singapore is like one of the cities like that they're putting out to the world. Yeah. Like this is
a lot of biotech. A lot of biotech in Singapore too.
Singapore.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, I guess we have to figure out. I have a friend who had he's one of his readings. He talked about, do you live in such a way that you would be an ancestor worth claiming?
That's good.
And I thought that was an interesting. Like, we do our best, and we're coming from a place that we would want, to be claimed. And Brother Shamari had said something like, would they want to lift a libation to you? At some, 50 years after you're gone, will you have done that work? And not that anybody has to do it alone. I think it's a collective consciousness raising, really, that we're engaged in. It is internal spiritual work. And not in a foo-foo kind of way, but like really like reckoning with this internally before we can tell others. And it's kind of this internal, external process. Absolutely. I don't think it's supposed to end this way. I really don't.
I don't either. I hope not. Thank you, Allison. You always have a space here on this channel. And I always tell you, like, whenever you discover something new or create a nice, new, pretty map, I want you to come back here and I want us to talk about it. And I want us to continue to try to get this information out to people. And in the meantime, I have to remember to start connecting you with people in my network who also have their own platforms. You know, listeners and followers that they've had for years. And I feel like you and Eric could really mesh, but I haven't talked to Eric in a couple of years, but I still follow his work in the Labor and Community Strategy Center they're in South LA actually. And his organization is rooted in the Black community. And I remember, I have to say this before we wrap up, but he has like, this wallpaper like on the front of their building that shows the decline of the Black population in LA. Oh, wow. And I think he would like to know, like I know, like he knows, like, of course, this is systemic. Of course, Black people were pushed out, but like being connected to you, I feel like would give him like, oh, that's what it was all about, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
His arc. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would be curious too, if you talk to him, somebody who is really influential with people that I have organized with locally who passed. I never had a chance to meet him in person, but his name was Nelson Peary. And he was a Black communist, and he spent time in Los Angeles during the Watts uprising. And I'm
sure Eric knows him.
Yeah. So Nelson Peary, I would say if folks want to look him up, he actually had a book called The Future's Up to Us. That's available online as a PDF, like Marxist something, whatever. And then he has 2 books about Black Fire and Black Radical. And he went underground in the 50s. He grew up in, I think, Minnesota. His dad was a postal worker because he was a World War I vet, and he got a good job, like it was one of the best jobs you could get to be a civil servant. And so he grew up in a predominantly white community, but then in World War II, really had this transformational experience through being trained in the South and fighting in the South Pacific. And he was a revolutionary thinker. He was an amazing revolutionary thinker that eventually relocated to Chicago and has a reading room and stuff. But it's hard because even those people aren't following me. I think he was more optimistic about technology than I am. But he was quite a force of nature, and he was in Los Angeles for a time. So,
yeah, wow, I had never heard of this guy. I just Googled him, and
he's amazing. He is really. I mean, he lived into his mid-90s. And he seems like a teddy bear, like someone who is both a thinker. They tried to co-opt him because he did the GI Bill in I can't remember if Minnesota or Wisconsin, maybe Minnesota, and they tried to pull him in, like, come to the country club and be at our table. And he said, I can't continue my degree and be a revolutionary. So I'm walking away. I'm walking away from academia. I'm not getting this college degree. And he apprenticed as a brick mason, and he built the suburbs all over, mid America cities. He built houses and commercial buildings, and he was a revolutionary.
Wow. Thank you, Alison. Yeah, he lived it. He didn't I won't name any people, but yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we know who all got their, degrees, and now they, want to censor people like us. So anyway, thank you, Alison. We have to bring you back soon, because I swear I watch your page every day and I'm like, damn it, she didn't discover something else. Like, there's this other thing now. It's always.
Well, people feed me a lot of information too. I can't take all the credit. I'm just trying to weave it together, as it comes in, try to make some sense out of it. But the more of us who actually have the language to talk about it with each other, that's where it's going to get momentum. And I have in this world that gets kind of weird with media space and owning content and leveraging your brand. I don't want to own this thing. I want to make it so on the Coltrane House, it says a thought creates a million vibrations and they all go back to God. And I just want to create that vibration and send it out, and then let other people pick it up.
Right. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. But like I said, you're always welcome here. And
I'll see what I come up with next.
Yeah. See what you come up with next, because each time you come on here, it's like the more people are starting to get involved and really listen and so the more people we can reach, I think hopefully is going to be better. But I'm going to see if I can get in touch with Eric Mann out at the Labor and Community Strategy Center and see if he will have you on his Pacifica radio station thing interview. He does a lot of that kind of stuff.
It's
What was your
Dark
question?
Waters, and it's Mark Ruffalo's movie. He was the
Okay,
director.
which Dark Water? I see
Dark Waters with an S, and Mark
Dark.
Ruffalo.
Oh,
I
so
think it was December 2019 that it came out.
Oh, wait, hold on. So December 2019?
I think so. Mark Ruffalo, he's like a water rights activist in New York State, and I think it's Dark Waters.
Is he an actor?
Yeah, he's an actor too. And
I'm about to say I've heard of that name, but I only know him as an actor, Mark Ruffalo. Okay, so if you got that, Gladys, Mark Ruffalo. So if you Google Mark Ruffalo, Dark Water, the right movie should come up.
Waters with an S on the end, Dark Waters.
Okay, Waters with an S.
Yeah. And you throw in Parkersburg, West Virginia, it'll come up, I'm sure.
Okay,
I mean, there's
West
a lot
Virginia.
of reviews. I think it was the New York Times have reviews of it. So.
Okay, yeah, because I'm planning on watching it too, Gladys. I'm glad you caught that. Thanks, Alison. We will see you next time, and I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Bye-bye.